We've seen the dystopian films where corporations have taken over from governments and run our whole society. We are living that reality now. Look at the billionaire oligarchs who run our world today, people like Elon Musk or Bill Gates. They're talking with governments all the time. They're talking with prime ministers, they're talking with presidents. Through the corporations they own and run, they can manipulate democracy itself. This is the war you don't see, and it's happening in every corner of our globe. Corporations have taken over massive parts of our military. So whether it's the Wagner Group in Ukraine or Blackwater in Iraq, it allows states to undertake devastating military operations but escape accountability at any level. The prevalence of private military and private security in our world is a symptom of a disease, and that disease is corporate power and the rule of the 1%. They have created a world to enrich themselves, but that creates a barren wasteland of a world. So the 1% need to hide behind walls now and hide behind these private security companies to escape the devastation their greed has caused and the corporate system has caused. And we're at the beginning of this trend. In 50 years, it could be that we have corporate armies which are bigger and more powerful than state armies. We could have particular companies going to war with other companies over resources. The dystopian fiction of the past has become today's reality. Corporations have spent decades and poured huge amounts of resources into infiltrating governments and getting them to work for them. There is a network of tax havens around the world. A lot of them run out of the City of London and British Overseas Territories, which allow corporations to avoid paying tax and contributing anything to the societies they're getting their wealth from. So we pay tax, they don't. We, the people, are subsidizing the corporations. From the NHS to schools to prison services, everything that we come into contact with in our daily lives is now run by corporations. Corporations are not allowed legally to have any other consideration apart from profit for their shareholders. All over the world, mining companies, oil companies are devastating the environment, but they don't have to pay for it, so they're not bothered by it. We have to pay for it. The big oil companies, ExxonMobil, BP, they knew about climate change in the 70s and 80s, but they did nothing about it because their only concern is profit. These are people with kids, with grandkids, but that did not impinge on their decision making. That did not impinge on their decisions to keep prospecting and extracting oil. Like an unstoppable virus, corporations are prepared to burn the planet in the seeking of profit. A major function of the corporation is to sell you a lie, that they are inclusive, that they care about you, that they care about society, that they care about human progress. It's all rubbish, and it's all done to make you buy their products. In the 80s and 90s, corporations had what they called a reputational crisis, which was affecting their ability to work in the developing world. Mining companies were very unpopular because of what they had done in communities, destroying environments, taking resources without paying taxes and all the rest of it. So they invented a whole industry which they call corporate social responsibility, a propaganda campaign to try and convince populations that they are upstanding members of our society interested in our progress. It's rubbish, and corporate social responsibility now has become a huge part of every corporation's operations. It's about increasing their ability to make profits. It's all a lie, it's all smoke and mirrors. But it's so deeply ingrained in our culture now that the branding has worked for a lot of people. Most people associate personalities with corporations. That's a preposterous idea. It's all been done by advertising agencies. They've convinced us that a corporation has a certain value system. Nike supports Black Lives Matter, but has sweatshops all over the world. Coca-Cola presents itself as a family-friendly, cuddly brand, whereas we know that in its bottling plants in Colombia, trade union leaders fighting for a better wage were being shot dead. BP, formerly British Petroleum, became Beyond Petroleum. They present themselves now mainly as an environmental justice movement, while they're increasing their exploration and prospecting for new oil deposits, leaving environmental catastrophes around the world. It's all a lie to make sure that the great unwashed, the population, do not obstruct their ability to make more money. Key to the expansion of European colonial rule was the corporation. In the 16th century, up to the middle of the 19th century, corporations needed to obtain a charter from the king or queen or parliament to operate. But what we've seen over the last 200 years is the corporation become unleashed from the state that created it and it's become a Frankenstein's monster. It's eaten the state that created it and taken on its power and made the state work for it. In 1928 in Colombia, workers for the United Fruit Company went on strike to fight for better wages. The government at the time sent in the Colombian army and massacred hundreds of them. During the Spanish Civil War, General Franco led a military coup against the democratically elected Republican government. Many corporations supported the fascist coup, including Ford and General Motors, who sold a total of 12,000 trucks to Franco. Texaco, the oil company, rerouted oil supplies for the Republican army to Franco's forces and illegally supplied gasoline on credit to Franco. Despite being fined $20,000 by the US government, Texaco continued this credit arrangement until the end of the war. When Franco's fascists finally triumphed, an undersecretary at the Spanish Foreign Ministry said, "Without American petroleum, without American trucks, without American credit, we could have never won the Civil War." After the devastation of the Second World War, there was a degree of idealism and hope about constructing a new world built on principles of justice and fairness and equality. But that crashed on the rocks of corporate power. Throughout the Cold War, Western governments working on behalf of corporations would take out any independent leaders who were using the resources of their country to benefit the people of their country. In 1951, in the very poor country of Guatemala in Central America, they elected a social democrat called Jacobo Arbenz, who enacted a very moderate program of giving land to peasants, taxing corporations a bit more. He was taken out in a CIA-backed coup in 1954 at the behest of the United Fruit Company, who were upset about his policies which were impacting their operations in the country. At the time of that coup, an unknown Argentinian doctor called Che Guevara was living in Guatemala City and saw what had happened, and it was a major part of his process of politicization. Soon after that, he moved on to Mexico, where he met Fidel Castro, and the rest is history. The year before Guatemala, in 1953, the CIA and MI6 had connived to take out the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh. What was his crime? He'd nationalized the Anglo-Iranian oil company and taken more of their profits for the Iranian people. That's not tolerated by the system, so we took him out and corporate rule was enforced. Iran has never been a democracy since. The US and UK installed the brutal dictator, the Shah, who ruled until 1979 when the Islamic Revolution displaced him. Corporations have always been political and in the worst possible way. Corporations are at war with us. They appear all-powerful, they appear impenetrable, and they appear unmovable. They are not. People may remember the 1990s. Corporate power was the major issue exercised in the left at that time. The World Trade Organization meetings had huge protests wherever they went. The famous one was in 1999 in Seattle, and that continued. You had the Zapatista uprising in Mexico in 1994 against NAFTA, the free trade agreement. When workers rise up, when people rise up to represent community interests, they fold straight away, join a union. And not only join a union, but make those unions independent and working in the interests of workers. Because union power is the one thing that corporations really fear. The other thing we need to do is get corporations out of our information system, because it's impossible to have an understanding of our society when we are bombarded with propaganda by a system run by corporations. So we need to create an independent media that can wrest control of the discourse, wrest control of the narrative, back to people and back to truth. It's time for people of all political persuasions to join the fight to reclaim our democracy, to reclaim our world from this out of control institution. The truth is, if we don't take on the tyrannical corporations who have corrupted our politics today, we will not have a livable planet for our children tomorrow. I've been investigating the secretive mechanisms through which corporations have enforced their rule on our world. My new book, written with my colleague Claire Provost, is called Silent Coup: How Corporations Overthrew Democracy, and it goes into many of the themes discussed in this video. And if you want to support a media which takes on corporate power, support Declassified and Double Down News on Patreon.